the benchmarks and the insights that go along with it. Ryan, I know, is excited as well to share the latest trends and what we're seeing as it relates to customer and employee experience.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us. And we've had a lot of great content today. So hopefully we can make it through this and everybody can stay awake.
Well, we promise not to bore anybody, but hey, while you're all here, get out your smartphones. We are only going to cover some of the highlights of the benchmark report. So this QR code that is on the screen will allow you the ability to download the full report. In that full report, it will go into more in-depth synopsis on what we're seeing as it relates to employee experience, customer experience, and something new that we did this year in our benchmark report, we collaborated with some industry experts to get their insights and opinions specifically as it related to certain content within the benchmark report. So I think you'll find some additional information in here, new and different than what we've done in the past.
Yeah, I think that was we thought, hey, we've always given you our perspective and advice on what we saw, but we gave some of the experts a preview of what we were going to release in the benchmark and had them share that insight. And so hopefully you can glean some additional insights from what they've shared. So.
Perfect. Well, one of the themes today, I think we've heard throughout today's session from the very beginning with Ryan through the panel discussions and even some of our guest speakers that have been on here today is talking about the employee experience and talking about that first and foremost. And so that's been definitely one of our approaches is putting the employee first. So with that, we're going to kick it off talking about employee experience. And if for some reason you'll see this QR code throughout our session here. If you didn't get a chance to download it on that initial slide, feel free to use that QR code now. But some really exciting news I think Brian wants to share with you that we've seen some positive changes here on the employee benchmarks.
Yeah. So one of the things over the last 3 years, when we look at the aggregate scores across all of our dealers we're working with, we went from a 12 NPS in 23 to a 16 NPS in 24, and now to our benchmark score of an 18 NPS in 25. And I think the really great thing about that is that a lot of the organizations that we're working with are understanding how important it is to serve the customer experience and to serve the employee experience to be able to deliver a great customer experience. And they're continuing to get better and better. And we have a lot of clients that repeat the employee survey process every single year. And that commitment to integrating some of the learnings that we're going to share with you in the next slide is, I think, what continues to drive this score higher. So what are some of the key things that we're seeing? Once again, we've talked about the importance of career development and growth. We know that these younger generations, the millennials and the Gen Zs, are looking for clear career paths, right? No longer are they interested in just coming on board and sitting in the seat. And when leadership tells them it's their next opportunity to move to the next seat, are they saying, hey, that's great, right? They're saying, listen, I want to have an understanding of where I'm going. I want to have mentorship in the organization. So I want to be paired with somebody with knowledge. And I want to be able to have growth opportunities that are both around kind of my own job that I'm in right now and what opportunities exist in the business. And sometimes I've even heard organizations are giving employees the chance to sort of define their own career path and then take some classes or mentor or shadow somebody else in that role to be able to make a determination if that's actually something they want. And sometimes they find out that it's not, and sometimes they find out that it is. But all of these type of behaviors we're finding to boost retention. So if you're not doing something around career development and growth that's kind of cutting edge, and evolving, that you're falling behind on that one for sure. This is reiterating some of the conversation we had earlier about internal communications and transparency. This legacy approach of we'll kind of tell you what we want to tell you once a year at the annual in-person meeting, those days are over. Aaron Wallace talked about omni-channel, communications on the customer side. Well, guess what? Employees are looking for omni-channel communication internally as well. They're looking for email communication, text communications, updates in the portal, video, things like that. Do we lose our slides?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right here. I'll reshare that.
oh.
Keep going, Ryan, if you want. Or
Did we maybe
okay.
lose? Yep. Let me just pull up mine here on my side. Oh, there we go. Thanks. Um, and working to make sure that you are keeping employees informed. I shared the story before about a dealer that went out and kind of asked their employees how often, what mode, all of these things. If you haven't done that recently, I would highly recommend doing that to get a better understanding of how your employees want to get communicated to and how frequently, as a best practice. Employee well-being and retention. I mean, we talked today about the fact that it's this customer centric perspective, right? And we heard a lot of people saying, well, it's not doing everything humanly possible for the customer. It's a balance. We need to figure out how we balance the OEM, how we balance the employee and the customer, and making trade-off decisions on all of that. And I think we need to make sure that we're balancing the employee well-being and putting those employees front and center. So maintaining competitive benefits. We commonly see pay and benefits is lower on the satisfaction area on our surveys. And you want to have these employees feel great about the culture because they're your key advocates out there talking to friends and other people about coming to work in your organization, leaving social posts and reviews and things like that are exactly what our younger generation are looking at to determine if you're the type of company they want to work at. And then leadership and workforce transitions. This industry especially is turning over, right? We've got a lot of boomers and Gen Xers in leadership positions that are going to be replaced with millennials and Gen Zs over the ensuing years. And so what kind of processes are you putting in place to make sure that you've got succession plans, that you're upskilling these younger generations, and that you're working with ethical, or you're going after ethical leadership approaches so that you get long-term engagement. And we've heard at one of the a summit we were recently at that the younger generations are turning over in 2 to 3 years, and it's hard to get them trained, get them aligned with the culture, to do the things that you need to do to get them to stay. And then we're hearing from other people that say, listen, if you create clear career paths and mentorship and opportunities, and that you have good communication and that you're treating your employees the way they want to be treated, there's a really good chance that even these younger generations will stay for longer than 2 or 3 years. So what we're finding on these employee surveys, even with the younger generations, is if you are figuring out how to build the type of environment and the culture that retains all the types of generations, that you will have strong retention and you will be able to start to train these younger generations into leadership roles because they're going to be sticking around longer and interested in being in your company. So those are some of the key things that we're taking away.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think we've definitely heard this sort of like two-way street, right? With the employee side, it's not sort of this one-sided approach from a communication standpoint, from an expectation standpoint. Everything's sort of shifting there. And so it's definitely a theme that we're seeing. All right, so customer experience. Let's dive into this a little bit. We'll talk about both voice of customer, and then we'll talk about reputation as well. So starting off on the customer experience side, a couple shifts that we've seen, I think this year compared to past years. So commonly when we're looking at this information, we want to look at different segments to understand where things are moving, what's interesting, what's happening as it relates to the industry. And in this case, again, we've taken a look at dealership size. So there's been a lot of movement in the last 5, 10 years. I think we're seeing even a little bit more this year and last year with some of the being in a downturn with some of our industries. I think we tend to see a bit more mergers and acquisitions during this time. And so I think that's going to continue. I don't think we see that going away anywhere anytime soon. But as we measure Net Promoter Score across the segments of dealers by their size, so looking at our larger dealers with 20 or more locations, our mid-sized dealers with the 6 to 19 locations, and then our smaller dealers where they have sub 5 locations, we can see a bit of a shift in the Net Promoter Score. In this case here, our mid-sized dealers are sort of leading the way with an 82. NPS. We continue to see some improvements with our large dealers. While they're growing and maybe are struggling to find ways to deliver consistent processes, they are embracing it and utilizing systems to be able to measure the customer experience, collect feedback. So they're getting a little bit more sophisticated with it. That's helping them, I think, improve things there. And our smaller dealers, in this case, were lower performing with a 79 Net Promoter Score. We also look at Net Promoter Score across the different industries. And so construction and agriculture have historically were a little bit closer to one another, and we're starting to see a bit more of a gap emerge here, which is interesting in the recent year. So we've seen a bit of an increase here with the construction group, a slight decline on the agriculture sector. Could be reflective too of the current economic conditions. We talked about that a little bit in the last session with Tractor Zoom on the ag side and some of the contraction that we're seeing that started last year, that we're continually embracing throughout 2025 at this point in time too. But customer sentiment is down a little bit there, but increasing on the construction side, I think. So always interesting to kind of compare the two markets, which are similar, but yet also very different. What probably is super interesting is we really dive in a little bit further into the details, looking at the Net Promoter Score across the different segments of the business. And so in this view here, we have this aggregated up across the industries. But if you do download the benchmark report through the QR code, you can actually see this data broken down across the industry as well as within the different departments of the business as well. So what was really nice, I think, and surprising to see is we saw an increase in service. I feel like that's been a point of struggle for a lot of dealerships over the last couple of years. I think a lot of it was heavily impacted by the employee engagement being down in the service department. It's something we have been working with dealerships on and promoting a focus on the service department really since COVID, or before. And so we've finally seen an increase there. So I think that was really exciting to see some improvements come out of that department. A lot of service is, highly dependent on responsiveness, communication. So those things are really critical. And I think that's where we saw some improvement and definitely a place to continue to focus on for future improvements in next year. There was some slight decline throughout the others, parts and sales, and rental feedback coming back. Again, just about a point decline on each one of those departments. A couple things on the part side, knowledge has been something that has been highlighted a lot over the last year. I think we saw a decline there from last year to this year. There's definitely some turnover with the parts department. Sometimes we hear from dealers that it's this particular person who's been there for a really long time and then has since retired. Or even I think in our panel session earlier, we were talking about a parts guy who was getting an absurd amount of phone calls on a daily basis because everyone wanted to talk to that individual. And I've heard that before where people will say, oh, he's on vacation. I'll call back next week. I don't want to talk to anybody else in this parts department. So that knowledge component really builds trust with the customers. What are we doing as we have this attrition, some of it natural and some of it we've got turn happening on the employee side to get these employees up to speed faster? And especially as we look at the younger generations who aren't staying potentially as long, what can we do to get them onboarded faster? And I think we had a conversation in the panel session around AI. And that may be an interesting place too to start to engage AI in training and onboarding processes to make information more readily available to those parts people so they can appear and seem to be more knowledgeable about what they're delivering from an experience standpoint to the customer that allows them to build that trust and increase the Net Promoter Score there. On the sales process, that has declined a little bit. I think it's a point of concern for everyone right now. Obviously, there's been a big shift with the industry. We've gone from sort of this order taking approach to sales. From now, we're really having to go out and hunt for sales. And you've heard this throughout a couple of the sessions today if you've been with us. And so, again, I think definitely something we need to focus in on here that probably is signaling a bit of concern to everyone and seeing that decline in this particular segment of the business. And so, how can we enable those salespeople, find the right people in the right seats to be able to go out and provide a really great experience and have some success there as well? All right, I think with that, I'm just kind of we'll move along into the next section here. I wanted to talk about some of these recommendations as we were talking about the different departments. I think it'd be really important here. So we talked a little bit about this on the parts department and service that's being provided. And interestingly enough, our recommendation here was focusing around customer service training, role playing exercises. And I love how this tied back into Aaron Wallace had mentioned earlier in our panel discussion around leveraging AI for doing some of this role playing training to where we can create sort of a virtual bot or assistant to be able to role play a customer. And, there's so much data and information available that we can get a pretty good live example going of role playing to train our staff on how to deal with maybe customer issues, as well as providing just general service there as well. So that may be something interesting for dealers to focus in on and look into this upcoming year. Also, after hours. So, I see a lot of dealerships are not providing after hours service from a parts department specifically. They were before, and it's definitely trended to go away. But at the same time, we still have people in need, especially during these high busy seasons where they have parts. So maybe finding alternative solutions. I know some dealers have like parts depots or lock boxes available at the dealership so that customers still can necessarily have that service without disrupting the employee. And I think that's what really drove a lot of the changes there in parts after hours was wanting to respect the time of employees when they're off duty necessarily, when they're not on the job working. And so trying to find some sort of balance there between keeping that employee happy as well as, servicing the needs of the customer. So another recommendation here for 2025 is on that sales process that we talked about. Some of these salespeople have, because they got into this process of just order taking, have lost some of the training that they had initially, the skills and processes as well. And so, there's a lot of things that are important on that post-sale process too. And we oftentimes, as salespeople, want to move on to the next opportunity and not take those next steps with following up with the customer after the sale and ensuring that the delivery experience was equally as good as that initial sales experience. And so I think strengthening their follow-up processes and post-sale process is going to be really key in 2025. There's some missed opportunities for additional upselling when we see those salespeople skipping or overlooking some of those key processes that happen post-sale and in that delivery experience. There's a lot of tools too that are available to our salespeople. And I know we have software and data everywhere we turn around, but the more that we can leverage that data and information in an efficient way and smartly through like our CRM tools, is really going to help those salespeople be more informed on their customers, the potential new customer, and what's happening. So try to leverage technology where possible to make things more efficient and more effective for you. When it comes to the service department, oh, sorry, can we go back 1 second? On the technician side, focusing in on, again, the knowledge component, so that expertise is really something that we want to focus in on based on the feedback that we saw in the benchmark report. And so what can we do there to help, maybe through mentorship, even AI potentially, to help them become more knowledgeable and get up to speed faster on things. And also sharing the feedback with the customers. So they saw an improvement, which means we had definitely a lot of positive feedback coming back from the service department. And, are those technicians getting that information to know that they're doing a great job? That'll boost their engagement, continue to do a great job going forward. So that came up again in our panel discussion, talking about leadership within the organization, making sure that anytime an employee is recognized in that customer feedback process, that's getting shared throughout the organization and definitely making its way back to that individual to know that they did an excellent job for that customer. And then the last thing is, again, data-driven information. Having a focus there on the inventory side of things and quotes. We've talked about how we can leverage this information to make ourselves more efficient, give ourselves some time back, which then allows us the opportunity to provide a better experience and more maybe face-to-face time, phone time with our customers as well. So I think continuing to make sure that we're utilizing that information, utilizing it too to communicate better and more effectively is going to be critical as well. Okay, so I think with that, now we can maybe move on to the reputation side of things. Perfect. So in 2024 for the benchmark this year, we saw an increase for our dealers on their average rating. So there's three things that we measure when it comes to a dealer's online reputation. It's not just the rating, which I think most people tend to focus in most importantly on is like, hey, my dealership's got a great score. We've got 4.8 stars or whatever it may be. And so we're doing awesome. Well, you may have 4.8 stars, but you may not be doing that well. And so we actually have a scorecard report. This is how we base this information on, is that data that's being collected. And there's three key components here. And the reason why we have three key components is this is what really plays effect into algorithms when it comes to SEO. So it's not just the rating, it's also how recent that review was. So when was your last review left? And then what's the total volume of reviews? And because of local SEO, a lot of this is going to be dependent upon your competitors in your local marketplace. So for those of you with multiple locations, there will probably be a significant difference from one store to another as to what a good score may be. So it's really important that you understand your local marketplace when you're doing analysis on this. And so not everything's the same. So our recommendations here are you really want to make sure that you have reviews coming in on a regular basis. Ideally, that you're getting at least one review per month, which means that your recency is going to be less than 30 days. And from a volume standpoint, we need to be getting about 2 new reviews during that time period. So, and again, this is all location specific, right? Because all of this is tied back to like your Google business, which we talked about earlier from an integration standpoint. And so we want to make sure that you're focusing on each store individually. That's all going to tie back to right to your website, which we've heard a lot of conversation around the importance of your digital and online presence. This is where your customers are going to interact with you on a regular basis. You know, even a dealer mentioned today that we're really trying to drive customers to our website, whether it's for more information. It's just easily accessible for them. And then there's the new customers, prospects, right? They too, this is oftentimes their first interaction with you is here. And so this is something that we should all be focusing in on and starting to get proactive with versus being reactive. And I find that that's where a lot of dealers are, or they're just responding to the negative reviews that get left, and they're not really taking a proactive approach. So through solutions like ours, we're able to automate the process of inviting customers while they're in the process of leaving feedback already. We can capture those positive Google reviews for you and use those for, positive promotion, marketing of your brand for that store as well. So a couple recommendations that we have here is making sure that you are prioritizing your online presence. You've heard it throughout today's session. One dealer that I was speaking with, I think, really said it best that, our online presence needs to get the same attention that a physical store location gets. And so if you have 5 stores, you really have 6 stores because you have your online presence as well. And so we need to really get a mental shift around that and start giving it that same amount of attention that we would to a physical location. So focus on your website, active social media, positive online reviews will all help with that. And I think really to get those positive reviews, automation is going to be key. You can ask your team members to try, like the salespeople, to ask customers to leave a review. It's hard to sustain adding another, manual process to their already busy day-to-day jobs. So wherever we can leverage technology and automation to really reduce the effort on your team there. And then leveraging these reviews. So there's a couple great ways to do that. One obvious way is from a marketing standpoint for customer growth, but also for employee engagement. So these reviews that are being left are great opportunities to recognize those employees for providing great experiences, and then also publicly from a recruitment standpoint too. So don't overlook employee reviews as well as the customer reviews and leveraging those from the employee experience as well. All right. So really next steps, Ryan and I always want you to be able to have something to walk away with from these sessions that we have here. So again, obviously download this report, take some time to read through it because there's a lot more insights in the full report, along with some more in-depth recommendations than what we're talking about here in today's session. So I think, get a good understanding, I guess, of where you are currently in your organization to sort of help you compare to your industry benchmarks that you're seeing here in this report. So I think just getting sort of a baseline is a great opportunity place to start. And then you can start identifying what you're doing well, which is great. You can recognize those things. And then you can also identify the opportunities for improvement, right? So maybe where there might be gaps between where you are and where the benchmark is. And you can utilize that information then to start establishing goals to help you understand, this is where we want to be and where we are now, and how are we going to get there? So developing an action plan. I think when we work with dealers, we typically recommend, especially if it's their first time around, just choosing a couple things, maybe even one if that's all you have capacity for, because showing success and actually achieving that will go a lot further than trying to bite off a little bit more than you can chew with that. So really don't go more than a couple with establishing goals for things that you want to focus in on for 2025. And I think you'll see a lot of success there. Again, reach out to Ryan and I at any time. We'd be happy to have a conversation. We love working with you all, whether you're participating in one of our programs or not. We are here as a resource to support our industry. So feel free to connect with either one of us. All right, Brian, you have any final thoughts? Otherwise,
No, I just think,
great
great information. Great job reviewing that, Emily. And I think that if you can just take one or two things away from this, to your point about our goal is really to figure out how to improve the overall industry. I remember a conversation I was having with a dealer one time that I asked for a testimonial, and his response to me was, I don't know if I want my competitors using you because, they may get better than me. And then he said, you know what? It'll bring up the whole industry and everybody will have to do better and deliver a greater experience. And I think, we feel very similarly to that. If we can help you, please reach out. Let us know what we can do.